Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. And it's good to have you with us. We're broadcasting from the Concierge Landscape Studios. We're brought to you by Extreme Exteriors and also American Family Insurance, the Kim Bennett Agency. If you're just joining us, we are talking about, with our first story, an Arizona state senator by the name of Nancy Bartow, who is saying that HOA contracts should not hold the same weight as other contract law because they're confusing.
Yeah,
because
her whole argument is so confusing and ambiguous. It's so subjective. What one person may understand, someone else finds very confusing. It's our responsibility, is it not, as adults, to make sure we understand what we're signing?
Well, yes, and that is the basic understanding of any kind of contract. One of the basic contracts when you purchase a home is that there are some qualifications, right? Mm-hmm. Remember, you need to be over 18, so you need to be considered an adult. You wouldn't allow a child, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, to be able to enter into agreement. Even when it comes to leasing, though, that's
a contract. Well, a lease is a contract as well.
You
have to be contract. 18 or over to sign a lease. You have to be of sound mind.
Sound mind.
Yeah.
And
which is
also,
another ambiguous phrase.
And also sober.
Sober. Now, why aren't we delivering breathalyzers? Why aren't we administering breathalyzers at some of these contract signings and closings?
There's a good idea.
I think we should.
Maybe that's something that ought to be considered.
Yeah.
Anyway, the law or legislation she's wanting to pass is not one that is necessarily a bad law. She's asking for some clarification.
There you go. Yeah.
When it comes to roadways in HOAs.
Yeah.
But it's
the spillover.
It's the spillover.
She's
exactly.
extrapolating that argument to everything about an HOA. She does not believe this opinion piece says that she says HOAs should not set rules on property that isn't theirs. They have no right to tell the owner how to behave. Well, the very fact that I purchased a home in an HOA means I gave up certain privileges and certain rights of ownership in order to gain services and conveniences.
Yes.
Right? They tell me I can't have a flock of sheep or pink flamingos on my lawn because they're doing the lawn mowing. The HOA is. So I gave up my right to plant stuff on my lawn so that they would do the lawn mowing.
And we know those types of agreements are in place everywhere, not just homeowner associations. You've got those same agreements in a city, in a municipality.
That's right.
In a county where you live, you know. And so you're going to be dealing with that no matter where you go in owning real estate. I think there is this notion, Tony, that when it comes to rights, it means that they're going to be totally unfettered, that there's nobody that's going to be able to prevent me from doing
whatever I damn well please.
Yes.
It's interesting that people get so upset and uptight about homeowners associations when you're right, this is not the only area of our life where we enter into contracts and agreements that limit what we can do and what we get.
Yeah.
The other piece of this is why, again, and we talk about this over and over and over again, why does the state need to step in and pass legislation about this issue when every homeowners association can govern itself, right?
Yep.
And make up its own rules and regulations? Couldn't a homeowners association decide, you know what, we don't want to regulate the public streets that run through our community, so let's take a vote, and we propose that that the public streets be regulated by the city. That we just match our regulations to whatever the city and an individual homeowners association could do that. Why does the state step in to mandate it?
That's a great point. And they, in the way all governing documents are written, homeowners in each and every HOA have that authority and that ability to do that.
That's right.
I know so many that have said they began with a pet restriction that said no pets over 25 pounds. And then they've had the annual meeting and they've gotten together and then they voted to change their documents to say that our that concerning pets, we will be in line with the municipality where we live.
There you
Boom.
go. Because that was easier, much easier to administer.
Exactly.
And to enforce. That's right. So again, the state steps in where it shouldn't. Just the fact that they're going to start mandating this means they're taking away rights from the people in the homeowners associations to govern themselves.
Well, here's the part that seems to be missed. People are thinking individual homeowners are getting their rights taken away, and they are. There's some homeowners
taken away, or
well, I'll get to that.
All right.
Just hang with me here.
All right, I will.
People in homeowner associations, not everybody's going to get their way. There are going to be people who are not going to be able to get what they want. Okay? That's a fact of life.
Boy, we hate that.
I know.
We hate that.
But that is a fact of life. What they fail to remember is that maybe 5 people think a certain way in a homeowner association. Mm-hmm. There might be another 95 or 200 who feel just the opposite. Mm-hmm. So I guess you're going to be in a situation where ultimately not everybody's going to get their way. So then you need to ask yourself, what would be the best way of handling it? Would it not be that the majority would rule? That the majority of the folks in that community could dictate what they want? And they do.
That's right.
Even in a city, if someone wants to change, how many times have you known neighborhoods that have said, we think it's a little bit unsafe not having a stop sign here.
Yep.
They've gotten together and said to the city, we want a stop sign.
Yep.
And they get enough neighbors.
I did it in my neighborhood in South Minneapolis. We just had to get a petition. We had to go around and get a petition signed, and we actually changed the direction of the stop signs. So, it's quite easy, and it's nice to be part of the process and have a say in what goes on.
And the idea is, if you're going to be living with other people, you have to give up some of your rights, because that is the only way that you can live in a kind of community or a neighborhood with other people, because other people are going to think differently than you.
That's right. However, we know from what we read every week and from interviews we've had with some people that minority, that very vocal minority who are not getting what they want, some of them say the democratic process shouldn't apply here either. We should get what we want. And we met one of those. We met Dr. Gary Solomon about a year ago.
And I think that's why more and more people are going to the state legislature in hopes that and we'll get to this with other stories here later on today. People say, well, so many people are apathetic. They don't know. They don't take the time to know what's going on at the state legislature. Yeah. So a few interested people will ask and try to promote legislation to try and circumvent
their HOA.
what their HOA may wish to do.
And speaking of Dr. Solomon, he gave a big thank you to State Senator Nancy Bartow on his website.
Isn't that interesting?
It is. Nancy, you should, know that you're judged by the company you keep. Dr. Solomon says HOAs are governing property they don't own, and they've made a cash cow out of it. This is the argument of his I love. He always thinks the homeowners associations are making tons of money by not giving him what he wants.
Yes.
Nancy Bartow is doing something about this. Read more from Nancy Bartow here. So that's from Gary Solomon's website.
HOA syndrome, right?
Yeah. He's the designer and drafter and developer of HOA syndrome.
Well, let's talk about one other aspect, and this is real important when we're dealing with contract law, because one of the arguments verbally that Ms. Bartow was stating why you should not hold HOA contracts in the same regard as others is because they're ambiguous. They're unclear. And when that happens, she thinks that the contract ought to be null and void. I would like to point out, and of course I can't say all, because you never can say all, because I have not
There'll
looked
be an
at
exception,
all contracts.
that's for sure. But most contracts, you're saying?
Most contracts that I'm aware of have this little clause that's called a severability clause.
Okay.
And basically,
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, for our listeners, a severability clause basically states any provision or provisions of this agreement that shall be held to be invalid, illegal, unenforceable, shall not affect any other provisions of this agreement. So in other words, they're saying anytime you get a group of people coming together to try and to carve out this agreement of how we're going to relate to one another, in their rush, they may have done something that may have seemed unclear, not because they wanted to, not because they were trying to take advantage, but because that happens.
That's right.
And
think about federal legislation that turns out to be very unclear when in practice.
Yes.
I mean, that happens on all levels of government.
Yes. And so when that happens with a severability clause, you're saying that if one portion of the HOA contract or document is unclear, that doesn't mean the rest of it is invalidated and it should be just thrown out.
Yeah, that's right.
That's I think a very important thing
truthfully,
to remember.
what she doesn't like and what Dr. Gary Solomon doesn't like is the fact that the governing documents state this homeowners association can regulate itself and it can elect a board of directors that passes its own rules and regulations. That's what they hate because they don't get what they want 100% of the time.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we need to take a break. When we come back, we've got so much more to cover, so don't go away. You're listening to Where You Live with Gene and Tony on AM 1280, The Patriot.